Today's special episode is a reporter roundtable with two special guests, City and State Florida Editor-in-Chief Jim Rosica and News Service Florida staff writer Ryan Dailey, who is also the producer of Deeper Dive and the man behind the curtain. Join us as we talk about F-bombs and higher education. No, they're not related. They're two separate topics. And we might take a little peanut butter stuffed pretzel break too. Join us, please, for a Deeper Dive Reporter Roundtable.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam, in the Terracotta Room with two special guests today. City and State Editor-in-Chief Jim Rosica. Look at that, just trip right off the tongue.
Wow, just came right off you. Wow, how about that?
And News Service Florida staff writer Ryan Dailey, who is also the man behind the curtain for the Deeper Dive podcast. Welcome, Ryan.
Thank you. For the second time, I get to be a special guest.
Welcome. Welcome
guest.
to our producer.
Oh,
thank you.
I love it. Terracotta Room's gorgeous today. The natural light coming in.
Hang on, I'm trying to...
Somebody take the special effects keyboard away from her.
I am a danger to the world and others, to myself and others. Okay, so we've got a couple of topics to talk. But first, before we get started, let's just take a note here, a little programming note to pat ourselves on the back. We are here recording our 50th episode of A Deeper Dive with Dara Cam. If that doesn't deserve... I don't know what does.
Very exciting. I feel all 50 episodes weighing on me.
Do you?
Yes. All of this seriousness.
He says it like it's a bad thing because we have fun when we're in here. Although he looks like a grump, I gotta tell you, he looks very grumpy. But I have so much fun when I do it with you.
This is because I finally shaved and got my hair cut, so I don't look like Rick Flag Jr.
So you can't hide behind the facial hair.
Can't hide behind the facial hair now. It's all me.
Yay, we like all you here in the Terracotta Room.
Oh, yeah.
And a week from this episode airing will be 1 year. So the podcast will be officially a 1-year-old podcast.
And you know, I was looking back over some of our guests. We have been very fortunate with the guests that we've had. For anybody who wants to listen, go back and listen to some of our old podcasts. Where can they find us, Jim Rosica?
You can go to www.cityandstatefl.com/podcasts.
And we have all of our, what will be 50 episodes available there. You can also find the podcasts on your favorite podcast platforms such as Apple and Spotify. And you can sign up and have those delivered, the new episodes delivered to your email. If you get first read, I think you automatically do. And if you're a news service subscriber, you also get an email reminding you of all the joys of listening to the podcast with us.
I do have to correct myself, though. I said podcasts. It's actually podcast. Okay. No S at the end.
Okay, well, we're just winging it here, as you can tell. We've had some super special guests other than those of us in the room today. We've had House Speaker Paul Renner, Senate President Kathleen Passidomo, Agriculture Commissioner Wilton Simpson. We've had his predecessor, Agriculture Commissioner Nikki Fried, who's now the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. We've had our sponsor, John Lockwood, twice. He's going to join us again to talk about pot and gambling. We love those topics.
And we love John Lockwood.
Thank you very much for sponsoring us. We've had Sheriff Bob Galtieri. We've had Max Stepanovich. Should I go on? We also have had NRA, National Rifle Association, the first president of the NRA, Marion Hammer. Should I just stop there, or should I keep patting myself on the back?
You can stop patting yourself on the back, but I would ask you, because I haven't seen you in person in a while, and I don't think that we've talked about this, but one of the more provocative guests that you had over the course of the entire podcast history, but more recently, has been Scott Rivkees. He was the former Florida Surgeon General. I believe he was the first Surgeon General, State Surgeon General of the Biden administration, geez and crackers, of the DeSantis administration.
Yes.
And I'm wondering how much you can talk about. I've had multiple people remark to me that he even was on the podcast and remarking about some of the things he said. Can you talk just a little bit about how that came together, how he wound up being a guest?
Yes, Scott Rivkees was the head of the Department of Health under Governor DeSantis during the first 2 years, or during the first stage, I guess is how I would say it, of the COVID pandemic. And he is a pediatric endocrinologist who no longer works for the governor. He now is a professor at Brown University, a professor of public practice, a public health expert. And how that came about, Jim, was I saw that he had done a couple of op-eds criticizing some of the things that are going on that in Florida, here in the Sunshine State, that are being advocated for by the governor, including the controversy over the treatment of transgender children. The critics have called it book banning. Ryan can correct me when I say book banning, because the governor insists it's not book banning.
Right.
But so I reached out to him, and he immediately, and I just thinking it was a suggestion from another colleague, Jim Turner, said you should have Scott Rivkees on. And I thought, oh, he'll never do it in a million years. And very soon after I emailed him, he was right on it. We had a little chat to catch up, and he was quite forthcoming. If you haven't listened to the 2-part series with Scott Rivkees, I highly suggest that you do so, because this is one of the only people who we've spoken to who is a former administration official, period. And the fact that he is a former administration official who is now quite critical of the direction the state is heading in terms of how it approaches pandemics. One of the other is fascinating. One of the other things that Dr. Rivkees spoke about was efforts in Florida and other states, and he never referred to the governor by name, but it was clear who he was talking about, not only Governor DeSantis, but other Republican governors and leaders who are embracing similar approaches to the issues I just laid out. In addition, another thing that Dr. Rivkees was commenting about was his concern about legislation and actions that states like Florida have taken to allow doctors to say whatever they want to say, whether it's medically proven or not, and to restrict what local governments and communities, businesses can do to impose restrictions in public health emergencies like COVID.
Yeah, and I think, if I recall, he kind of juxtaposed that with what is happening with restrictions on library books and things of that nature, if I'm remembering correctly.
Right, that is exactly what he did, and he used the analogy of doctors can tell you about succubus, but you can't read about incubus in school. Something like that. I know I just butchered it. I'm sorry, Dr. Rivkees, but we want to have you back on again, so I should probably clean that up.
But I think one small takeaway is seems pretty clear that he's still keeping an eye on what's happening in Florida all the way up there in Rhode Island.
Everybody is keeping an eye on what's happening in Florida in many different policy areas. I think that's true, don't you guys?
I do. I think one of the things that struck me about both his appearance on the podcast and his op-eds is he's very careful to criticize policies but not people, although the danger there is that you're not connecting the policies to certain people who are pushing them. But he did come across as a very politic person, not impolitic, in other words.
I tried to make those connections for him because
Understandably so.
one thing I think that's notable about Dr. Rivkees is I think the last time anyone saw him in public was at a panel where there were state health leaders and reporters were asking questions. This was amid the COVID pandemic. Reporters were asking questions about how long we would have to be wearing masks. And Ryan, you probably remember a little better than I do. What was the scenario where the Dr. Rivkees got a tap on the shoulder from someone in Governor DeSantis's comms team, and we never saw him again in public after that?
Well, I think it was the cabinet meeting room. I'm fairly certain.
Yes, it was.
And I believe, to your point, it was some sort of comment about there not being and I'll probably, this is an approximation, I'll probably get something wrong here, but there was some comment to the effect of like there not being an end in sight perhaps to mask wearing, and I think it was Helen Ferret.
Helen Ferret, right. Who is now the executive director of the Republican Party of Florida.
And obviously much was made about that tap on the shoulder, and I think maybe there was a whisper, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I wasn't there. I was at home isolating as a type 1 diabetic and a woman of a certain age. I was at home isolating, which I have been doing for, I guess I'm out and about now.
But time flies. That was what, 2021 or 2020?
I think it was 2021. Geez, we're just throwing facts right at you guys today. We're totally winging it. One of the things we wanted to talk about while we're on the political spectrum is Nikki Fried. As I said, she was a guest before she was on her way out, I believe, as ag commissioner, or after she lost the Anyway, she ran for governor, did not win the primary, and so she didn't seek re-election as ag commissioner. And before she became chair of the FDP, she was on the show. We spoke with her. But she's been in the news lately, and Rosica, your team, had a very interesting story. And in fact, I just came from a lunch with 6 of my friends where this was a topic of discussion. So,
oh my.
Oh yes, we had a lot of opinions about this. So let's open it up with we're going to say the actual words here in the Terracotta Room, but you, dear listeners, we'll make it G-rated for you. Ryan will work his magic.
It might not be G-rated. It might be PG-rated.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. G-rated in my mind, which is in the sewer.
Yeah, well. So actually, we had on today's website, we had a story by our Tristan Wood about Nikki Fried's use of, we'll call them curse words, cuss words, expletives.
Especially the F word is
profanities.
The F word is a favorite of hers.
And mine. It clearly,
and mine,
well, I was going to say, and yours too.
Yes.
No, so that's the way it is. But he did a story for us it was published this morning called WTF: Florida Democrats Getting Attention with Bad Language, and it talks about how this kind of started when she and others were arrested during a protest outside of Tallahassee City Hall. This was against the most current abortion ban, the 6-week abortion ban that went through session this year. And she was photographed being led away in handcuffs and in a shirt that read, "Just f***ing vote."
Oh.
Except it didn't say.
No, it didn't.
Didn't say
Asterisk.
It had asterisks, and the I was an exclamation point. However,
Very creative.
However, she has gone on to use the actual F word in other contexts, and she has used the bull, bull horse hockey word in.
She said bullshit.
Ryan's
Ryan's going to fix it, so don't worry.
Okay, well, good. We're going to say what she actually said, which was talking about how the Florida Democrats needed to back Ron DeSantis into a corner and call out his bullshit. This is at the Leadership Blue Gala that they recently had, and the keynote speaker there, those of a certain age and a certain television predilection will remember the West Wing series, and actor Bradley Whitfield, who was at the event and called DeSantis a f***ing coward. And so we talk about the use of the increasing use of swear words in political discourse and how they have been adopted by Nikki Fried and other Florida Democrats.
And there's an interesting little factoid here. According to Tristan, the use of swear words is most common among Gen Z, age 24 and younger, and millennials, those 25 to 40. Those groups tend to not have negative associations with those words, instead using them for emotional release. Well, I might not be young, but I'm young at heart.
We use them. I would say that those of us in Gen X use them for emotional release all the time.
We just use them as adjectives.
However, I will say, I don't know if I want to necessarily speak for all of Gen X, but I am mindful of my surroundings. I'm mindful of my audience.
You are much more than I am.
I think maybe the younger generations are less mindful of using certain language around certain people, and I'm very I have a heightened sensitivity.
Well, you also have young children at home, and I don't. And I come in here and I get behind the mic and I'm like swearing like a sailor, and I don't think of not doing it because it's who I am and how I talk. In fact, once I was invited to be on the press skits for, I think it was then Governor Charlie Crist's office, and they asked me to play Craig Fugate, who was the head of the Florida Division of Emergency Management. And they gave me a CERT polo shirt and a CERT ball cap, and their shtick, their
State Emergency Response Team.
That's right. Their motto back then was "Get a plan." I believe it was Charlie Crist. I don't think it was Governor Bush. I think it was Charlie Crist. I'll have to remember, but it was some governor's office that enlisted me to do this video for the press skits. And they said, just go up there and tell them to get a plan, but talk like you regularly talk. And so tell them to get a f***ing plan, and without telling me the words. So I got up at a podium with a camera on the other side of me, and I was waving my arms around and encouraging people to get a f***ing plan, and almost my whole comments were bleeped out, and everyone thought it was hilarious because it is how I speak, just as in the normal course of a day, as our dear listeners and my dear colleagues will know.
And see, I'm totally different because, in addition to young children, I also have an 80-something Italian-American mother who prays the novena, and I'm very mindful of using the F word in front of her as well.
That's right. That's funny because my grandfather, I was raised by my grandparents. Some of our people might know that. My grandfather, and he was really old anyway. I was raised by my grandfather, and I bought him he was sick for a while, and I bought him a little placard, and it said, "Same shit, different day," and he had it posted on the wall right next to his easy chair where he sat. So, and he was from the old country. He was from Italy. So we had clearly different upbringings. He never would say those words, but he thought it was funny when I.
And as a professor that we quoted down the bottom said, if they're using it strategically, it's a good idea. If they're just using it because, hey, let's curse, then that could come back to bite them.
Well, I'll tell you what Milady said. There were 6 of us, a mix at this lunch I just came from. There were 6 of us, a mix of Republicans and Democrats, mostly Republicans. I would say mostly moderates. And there was one person and myself who were not bothered by Nikki Fried's use of the F word.
Only 2 out of 6.
Only 2 out of 6.
Bothered.
And these are women who the F bomb is part of their regular everyday vocabulary.
See, interesting.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And they thought it was off-putting. And, maybe not, it gives an impression that you would want to leave. But to me, the power of those words has really diminished as we don't really have network television so much anymore. We have cable television where the shows that we watch aren't being censored. So to me, and as again, I'm a really poor judge of this because it is these words are such a part of my vocabulary that they don't really. To me, it's not even a thing. In fact, I was surprised to see the story. I wasn't surprised to see the story. I was surprised that Nikki Fried's use of the F word was such a topic of discussion. I mean, she's trying to gin up excitement among young voters, because when young voters show up, the Democrats believe that when young voters show up, they're more likely to vote Democratic, and young voters have not been showing up in Florida. So how do you get those voters to the polls? Is her use of cuss words enough to turn off older voters to the point where they're going to say, I'm not going to vote for Democrats, I'm going to vote for Republicans?
Well, maybe she doesn't care. Maybe she's just so focused on who we got, we're going to keep, but we need to get this new crowd. And if we need to speak to them in a language that gets their attention, then we're going to do so. She says in the story, we're having to fight differently. Maybe this is part of fighting differently.
Stick with us. We have a reporter roundtable with City and State Florida Editor-in-Chief Jim Rosica and News Service Florida staff writer Ryan Dailey.
Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to A Deeper Dive with Dara. Something else that we've been talking about has gotten a lot of attention is a story that Ryan wrote that got a lot of coverage around the state. Ryan, we're talking about higher education and the search for university presidents, a new law that has an impact on the search, and stuff that's going on down in South Florida. Ryan, over to you.
So I did a story that ran Friday of this past week, but it was a look at a 2022 law that provided some public records exemptions related to when colleges and universities are searching for a new president, which has happened often since that law the bill was debated in the legislature and passed and ultimately signed by Governor DeSantis. At the time that law was in the legislature, I believe 5 of the state's 12 universities were at various stages of looking for new presidents. Since then, there have been some state colleges that have looked for new leaders. But the time peg of the story was this issue was sort of re-upped by an issue that is ongoing at Florida Atlantic University, which is they're in the midst of looking for a new president. They were in the home stretch. They had 3 final candidates. And then boom, I believe on a Friday, I believe late on a Friday, which was very fun for reporters, I'm sure, the chancellor of the state university system put out a letter that said, we've discovered some anomalies in FAU, Florida Atlantic University down in Boca Raton. We've discovered anomalies in their president search, and we are hitting the pause button on that search. That letter sort of put into hyperdrive the speculation that State Representative Randy Fine, a Republican out of Brevard County, has been rumored to be in the running for that job. I
think he's expressed an interest in it, and he has been reportedly, if not in the running, interested in it, right?
Yeah, I think you are right about that, and I believe at least one media outlet contacted the governor's office, and there was a statement, I think, by a spokesperson in the governor's office. I don't know that it came from DeSantis himself, but that said something to the effect of, we'd like to see someone like Randy Fine in that role. I don't know that it was an explicit endorsement of Randy Fine as a candidate, and this is going from memory, but it was something that kind of went up to the line of saying we wouldn't mind seeing that.
I think it's important to point out that one of the 3 candidates, one of the 3 finalists for the job of president of FAU is an admiral who heads the Navy College or something, right?
Yeah, it was the U.S. Naval Academy, and I think the
Naval Academy.
I think the role is they call it superintendent or something to that effect. But the 3 candidates were involved in education in some capacity or other. I think there were 2 other finalists who have roles in higher ed. But yeah, there was no one on that short list who was really a big Florida political player. Mm-hmm. And I think people who were critics or people who were anxiously watching for a finalist list, those who were in the camp of, we hope we don't get a political insider. They had a brief shining couple days where they were breathing a sigh of relief. I'm sure
everyone was saying, when people were saying to me, oh, well, looks like, Randy Fine didn't make the list, or DeSantis's pick didn't make the list. And I was saying, yet. Because I just knew something was going to happen, because we've had these presidential searches. Another one was halted, right?
Yes, that's a little bit more of a roller coaster, in the sense that Florida Gulf Coast, and I want to say this was later last year, Florida Gulf Coast was looking for a new president. They went through an entire first iteration of their search, in which they ended up with, the sequence of things is, they ended up with 3 final candidates, but 2 candidates dropped out. So they had 1 finalist who was teed up for a vote by their board of trustees, which the board of trustees of the school has to give the green light.
Right.
And it was an internal candidate. I believe his name's Robert Gregerson. He had held some high position at the school. He was the lone finalist. There was a meeting of the trustees where they were slated to vote, give him the green light or say no. And before they could get to that vote, the chairman of the trustees, I believe, in the middle of the meeting,
got a phone call.
I got a phone call, and I believe that phone call, from his accounting of things, was from the chairman of the State University System Board of Governors. So that's,
which has to give the second say so, which gives the second green light.
The final one, yes,
Right,
yes.
the final one.
So,
And then he ended up saying, "Oh wait, did I say we were going to vote on that today? No, we're not. We're gonna wait."
big picture, what you need to know is after that phone call, the search was, they elected to reopen the search.
Right.
On the second iteration of the search, which by the way, like pretty much just concluded a matter of weeks ago. This was a very long, drawn out process.
Yes.
In the second iteration of the search, Gregerson, and I don't believe that any of those original three finalists even
Right.
came back for the second round.
Yeah.
It culminated in an internal candidate at FGCU getting the job, who is now, she stepped into the role as the first woman to lead the university. And, that itself was a razor thin vote of the trustees. It was like 7-6 and very sort of a tense meeting because there was a sort of a more political insider candidate who had been a higher up at the State Department of Education.
Right.
Who was, I think, in some circles thought to be the sure thing.
Right.
Who ultimately didn't get it. So, I mean, saying all that to say, I think where we're going with this is that some of these president searches have generated some controversy.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been...
It comes amid Governor Ron DeSantis and his appointees on the Board of Education and the Board of Governors, which oversees the state university system, amid an effort to overhaul the state's education system, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, absolutely. And, this story that I wrote this past Friday sort of looks at, you have everything we just discussed, the larger effort to sort of remake higher education
In a more conservative, ideologically conservative approach.
I mean, certainly, I don't think that's even very disputable, really.
Right.
And the governor talks about it at length and often, and he has criticisms for what he sees as the state of higher education and the things that he's trying to shift within higher ed. So you have that, and then you have president searches that are ongoing under this 2022 law that, and I'll be brief here, but essentially what it does is it created a public records exemption for information that could identify people who have applied to the job until near the end of searches. That's when information about the finalists can be released. So for instance, FAU, they land on their final three
Right.
people. Well, yeah, here they are. Here are their, you can see their resume and
Right.
cover letter and
But
whatever.
we never know who all applied for the job.
Correct, which in some cases can be hundreds of people.
Right.
If I'm not mistaken, the University of Florida that got a new president last November, I think the school self-reported that they had something like 700 people
Wow.
apply.
Yeah.
So it can be, and FAU may...
And then they ended up choosing Nebraska U.S. Senator Ben Sass.
That's correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Who was a lone sole
The only
final
finalist.
candidate.
Yeah.
So this story essentially looked at how...
So tell us what your folks said about how the law is being implemented.
That was the whole crux of the story, is that, this law, because you can't see applicants, for instance, it has played into the FAU issue. The FAU issue, Chancellor Ray Rodriguez essentially alleged in his letter that one of the applicants, who was, I think Rodriguez said at least one applicant, was asked certain demographic information such as whether, about this person's sexuality.
Is that against the law?
There's, I believe, at least federal guidance against doing that. It may be.
He referenced the federal guidance in his letter.
Correct, yes. And the other thing is that it was asked a question about sexuality and about preferred pronouns.
The search firm that was conducting the firm, that this was a form letter that they used and all of their searches around the country, and they probably did not understand that Florida is not with the preferred pronoun program, and should have amended that form.
It's the new PPP.
It is the new PPP.
I mean,
So what did you spoke to the sponsor of the 2022 legislation, and you also spoke to a First Amendment rights advocate. What did they tell you about what happened with the FAU search?
Sure. So both of those sources came at the issue from different angles. So the first one you mentioned, former Republican State Senator Jeff Brandes from St. Petersburg, his big issue with the law, and he had some strongly worded things to say about it, among them that certain people in these presidential search processes have perverted the intent of the law, using his words. His big issue with it is some of these searches coming down to one final candidate. Because indeed, the bill that he carried in 2022, it does make reference to like a group of applicants, and I think the law refers to a group of candidates, and it uses plural words.
At the time that this bill was being debated, I remember critics were saying that it's going to end up that we're not going to know who's applying, and we're going to end up with a single finalist, and that's kind of what's happened.
I vaguely remember that. I think that I can say for certain that the argument for the bill, that Brandis's main argument for the bill, was that the shields were being put in place, these records exemptions were being put in place. So if you're a president of, a university in another state, or anywhere for that matter, and you are, or just a high-ranking official at a school, and you are looking to get that university president job, you want to be able to apply and be assured that it won't be found out. Your current employer won't find out that you're seeking other.
It'll help attract better candidates because they won't be in fear of losing their job because their bosses know they're sniffing around in the Sunshine State.
And repeatedly, I heard him say something to the effect of, "This is in an effort to get the best and deepest pool of applicants."
He is pretty. I mean, he did use strong language in your interview with him, and he was very unhappy about.
Did you have to beep that too?
There weren't curse words. Strong.
Strong. Okay, forceful. We should say
Forceful language.
But
okay.
the second person you mentioned, which is Bobby Block, who is executive director of the Florida First Amendment Foundation, he was taking the angle of, when you shield these applicants, when you can never know the full group of applicants that applied, pulling this out of a hat as a for instance, if the chancellor of the university system says an unnamed applicant was asked these questions, you then as the press, as the public, you can't even know which candidate it was. So his argument was that it takes the public's ability to vet the step-by-step of the process, the public and the media, etc. It takes that away when those things are shielded.
What do you think is the possibility that the law will be amended this next legislative session, 2024?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I have...
0.
Yeah, probably not. Probably not high.
I without hesitation, the old bat
so
says,
high that it does not rise above 0 on the number line.
That's my prediction,
that's
but Ryan,
goes.
you're the expert.
Well, it passed in 2020, signed in 2022. When do you guys would know this, when do the records exemptions laws have to come back? Is that every 5 years?
It's in the bills, right? Isn't it? Sunshine.
Yeah, you have to. It's in the individual legislative language.
Yeah. They have to revisit it at some point, but I don't think it's automatically 5 years. You could be right, but I just am unaware if that's the case.
Right, so it's probably not uniform like every records exemption.
Right.
So, I mean, who knows? Maybe by the time that rolls around, it gets another look. And I mean, the other thing is that, like I mentioned before, I mean, there were so many open president spots at the time this thing was passed. And in many cases, that's a job that you stick in for a while. So, like, I don't know. Maybe this issue might cool down because, I mean, I don't know that there's crazy high turnover of university presidents. Maybe now in this era more than back in the day, but like Mike Martin at Florida Gulf Coast had held that role for quite some time. And in many cases, I think you see people hold on to those jobs, you know. And the contracts are usually like 3 to 5 years, but then they get renewed. And
while we're on the topic of higher ed, you wrote a brief yesterday that bought my eye. I'd like you to talk about it before we wrap up today, and I'd like to get Jim's thoughts on this too, about the number, the degree of turnover at New College of Florida. Talk about, we know that the governor and the university system leaders have targeted New College and are wanting to remake it into a more conservative, it's a state's small liberal arts college with, I think, 700 kids. The interim president there now is, after Governor DeSantis appointed a slate of conservative trustees to the school. The interim president is former House Speaker Richard Corcoran, also former Education Commissioner, a Republican who often, when he was the House leader, said that he wanted to be a disruptor. So he is disrupting.
Good memory.
Yes, he is disrupting at New College. What was in that brief that you wrote the other day, Ryan?
Basically, as the fall semester approaches quickly, the school, which has fewer than 100 faculty members, so, you know,
small,
probably a drop in the bucket compared to a UF or an FSU.
Of course.
They are in the process of filling 36 faculty positions. So that's, I mean, quick math, and I'm no mathematician. That's like a third of their whole faculty. Now, the provost for the school said that 15 incoming faculty members have signed offer letters, so there's been some progress made there.
As visiting professors?
I believe it was visiting professors, yes. And, you know, the reasons for the departures sort of vary. I mean, what the breakdown that was given at the meeting was six faculty members retired, 6 resigned, 6 took leave without pay. But then there's another group of 16 that, you know, have left for reasons like being assigned research leave or being on family leave. But regardless, the provost said he was answering a question from another trustee as to whether, like, is this higher than normal? Which I think just on its face is pretty like, yes, of course. But he said that he called it a ridiculously high level of turnover. And
ridiculously high. That's disruption.
That is disruption.
But I mean, you know, that is one of many big changes that are happening at the school. I mean, I think, you know, the legislature appropriated a good deal of money to do things like offer students scholarships. I think they were offering something like a $10,000 scholarship. I think they want new blood in there as far as the student body. I think there already sort of was an effort to let's get new faculty members in here. So to what degree, you know, this is actually something that's desirable to the revamped board of trustees and the new guard down there, I'm not sure, but I do know that it can't feel terribly comfortable to be on such a short timeline for hiring.
Yeah, I would think that they want to get, you know, out with the old and with the new to people who might be more in line with the new ideology, you know, more conservative ideology. And the thing that I think is important to remember, that there's still, you know, there's a bunch of students that might not be a large amount compared to other universities, But all of these changes and these teachers are leaving while there's still kids going to school there.
Yeah, I'm sure they're in a summer semester right now.
Right.
And I think fall semester starts end of August. But I mean, again, this is not the sole issue that they're focusing on. They're probably juggling a lot of stuff down there. They're setting up athletic teams.
That's right.
They're now the Mighty Banyans, I believe. So they have a new mascot.
What's a banyan? Or is that a banyan, a rooster?
No, it's a big old tree.
No, that's bantam.
Oh.
It's a big...
Oh, the banyan trees. Yeah, they're gorgeous.
The Mighty Banyans. But, they're...
Well, usually... Wait. Because usually sports mascots here, this is one of my very weak areas of knowledge, is sports, as you guys know. But aren't mascots usually like animals, not...
I don't know. Is the Philly Fanatic an animal? Is Gritty an animal?
Gritty.
Well, it's a living thing. I mean, yes, I guess a tree is a
No,
living
the Fanatic is not a living
I mean, I think you've got your... If I were to guess...
College. Owls. The FAU are the owls, I believe.
I mean, I would venture to say that probably the breakdown is probably most of them are probably animals or a living thing, which, hey, a tree is a living thing.
Yeah.
But
There you go.
animals...
And so is a
I need you
bantam.
to research this and do a brief on it, Ryan.
A bantam
Are there
is a
any
living
other
thing, and
universities
banyans are
that have
living
trees
things.
as their mascots?
If I'm not mistaken off the top of my head, I think Stanford. I'm not sure. I think
The
they're...
Mighty Oaks?
Well, I think that...
the Redwoods?
there might be the Cardinals, but they're
The
actual...
towering sequoias.
Oh!
I know that they have like a big tree that hangs out on their field when they... Yeah.
Stanford.
I got it up on the old Google Images here, but this very intimidating looking tree. That
There you go. There's a tree.
There you go. That is a tree. And we have to find out if that's their school mascot.
Yeah, they're the Cardinals, but they do use like an
So
alternate...
they're the Cardinals. They're not the whatever kind of tree that is.
But yeah, New College, the Mighty Banyans, it's a tree that's flexing its muscles and looking very imposing.
And they also have asked money for an institute of free thinking.
Freedom Institute.
Freedom Institute.
I believe was the name, and it's $2 million, but I think they're looking to have that be recurring. I think
That means it'll get funded every year.
it would be like, for instance, like faculty members who are involved in this Freedom Institute would give classes for credit, but then it would also be like inviting speakers to campus to debate like these hot topics, and also like giving events to the public in the Sarasota area and stuff. It seems like the scope of it is far beyond just 4 credit classes for students. So
Like a conservative think tank, maybe.
I mean, I think what was laid out in the mission was something like, it's going to be topics that, are heavily debated, something to that effect. But I mean, the leadership at the school, I don't think it's much of a secret, it certainly leans conservative. The president of the school is a former Republican House Speaker. And,
Right.
You have...
Did I mention he's a disruptor?
Could you mention again that he's a disruptor? That's the question.
It just struck me.
How many
remember when he said
times?
that. I just remember when he said that. It was interesting to me. That's all. That's.
My son says the same thing. I'm a disruptor, Dad. Yes, you are, Nick.
Does it work? Does he get away with stuff that?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't. He gets course corrected.
Well,
Course corrected.
a little nugget out of that story. I just pulled up the story that I wrote about the Freedom Institute. So that $2 million that they're asking for, $1.755 million, so the vast majority of it would go toward hiring, the way they put it, hiring scholars to work and teach on the new college campus.
Yeah.
So I think, and this was touched on in the more recent meeting that happened yesterday as of when we're recording this. There was some talk of some of the faculty that they're looking to hire would be the scholars who
For the Freedom Institute.
And I think it was now interim president Corcoran said something to the effect of they want to hire people who will get students interested, who would draw
students.
Yes.
Cool.
So I think that's where I don't think you'd get much surprise from the New College community or, the Sarasota community that's been following these moves if those hires were of the more conservative side of things.
Well, that's a little journey into higher education in Florida. Thank you very much for that, in-house higher ed guru Ryan Dailey. Jim Rosica's looking at me across the table like he has something.
No, I'm fixated on, he referred to pulling out a nugget. It's making me think of the delicious peanut butter filled pretzel nuggets that I have back on my desk that I am just waiting to get to.
I love them. I love it. Yeah, you've given me.
You're the one that's been eating all the pretzel nuggets?
No,
Son of
a... It's been me. I can't eat, I have type 1 diabetes.
No, you can't.
So nothing's on my meal plan.
Stuff.
Although I will say the Reverend Aaron, is that what we call her? The Reverend Aaron?
She is the Reverend Aaron.
The Reverend Mrs. Rosica was kind enough to bring in a jar full of pistachios, which is something that is on my meal plan. So shout out to her.
That is right.
And her sweet mother, Sue.
Mama Sue. In Rio Rancho, New Mexico.
Thank you for listening, Mama Sue.
The City of Vision.
The City of Vision.
That's its nickname.
City of
Wait,
Vision.
can I do it? I don't know which one this is, but can I just...
Yeah.
That is now the City of Vision riff.
That was a shout out. She's our most dedicated listener.
She is a great listener, and we love her, and we love her daughter's pistachios.
Thank you.
All right. Well, that wraps up our 50th episode with the 3 mooks today. Jim Rosica, City and State Florida Editor-in-Chief, and Ryan Dailey, staff writer at the News Service of Florida, and also the producer of Deeper Dive. Thank you, guys, and let's come back and do it again in 50 more episodes. We don't have to wait that long.
Absolutely.
I'll probably be back before that.
Yeah, I'm right down the hall.
You're going to be a regular with all the stuff that's going on in higher ed, so.
I hope so. Keep me busy. I'll be back.
All right. Thanks, guys. I'll see you soon, and thanks for listening.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Dailey, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs, LLC, and performed by Ryan Dailey and Danny Reyes.